Okay. It's great to see so many people still here, and I'm aware I'm keeping people from buses, so I won't delay and go over time. When Thomas asked me to come and speak to you about the Leaders for Compassionate Care programme, I suppose really I had to look and see what was the key message of the programme. And Abby Masterson from the Florence Nightingale Foundation, who we've commissioned to deliver that programme, touched on a lot of that earlier this morning. So there's a certain overlap between our talks. And I think someone mentioned the Stranglers earlier on, and the connection with the title, and I suppose We Don't Need Another Hero, is more recent. I'm not sure. Tina Turner, probably some of you are still too young to remember that. And I don't have quite as good a picture either of that footballer to attract you. But I thought about it, and I suppose what the key message for me then really was about, heroes and moving away from a style of heroic leadership into a more distributed leadership. And I suppose really kind of, I want to think, well, what are we moving away from, and what kind of heroes sort of meant to me? And who do I think of when I think of a hero? And I suppose I'm going to upset Juanita and maybe Tipperary or other counties here when I say I'm from Kilkenny. So we tend to think of Brian Cody as one of our heroes, but he wasn't available for an interview, so I went more local. So that is our own under 21 club from. No, it's Rower-Inistioge. And they were the under 21 champions in 2016. And I had a link in there and speaking to someone because my husband actually trains the team. So I wanted to hear what his story as maybe a hero. He's of course my hero, but what way is he seen by his team and by his spectators and by, most of all, by the players? And while I was looking through the pictures, I found this one as well, which was the All-Ireland Championship that the club won back in 2013, and the whole talk here being about compassion. That's one of the team there showing compassion to Kilnamead Leitrim from Galway, who lost to us in extra time. And I suppose the compassion, they had actually lost a player, one of their players over in London that time. There was an accident. So it just shows there's compassion in hurling as well. So I asked him really what is the secret of it, and how did he go about winning and doing so well, because it was 25 years since they'd been up senior. So they'd won in All-Ireland and they had been up senior, and then he came back and there was an under 21 win after 41 years. So he is a bit of a hero really. So what was the secret? So he said really it's about harnessing the belief. And if it's there, he said, in bringing that out. So I said, well, what if it isn't there? Then how do you enable it? So he said to me really, and it goes back to what we've all been talking about during the day, and he talked about values as well, and that whole thing of an honesty of a team, and their, the values of themselves as hurlers, that fairness, that fair play that you see in the top picture there, about having courage and having a work ethic. And I suppose a pride in their club, in their county, and in their national game. And so that sometimes that's kind of missing within ourselves, kind of working for the HSC. We tend to be somewhat disconnected at times, and I think Mark was alluding to, talking to people on where do the values come out of, and are they really our values? So it's another part of his role then is ensuring the circumstances are there, that the competencies are there to enable performance, and I suppose every leader would recognise those as key things. The biggest thing he said too is not abdicating responsibility, and I suppose that's from all players in the team. So you can't rely on your forwards, you can't rely on your backs. Every member of the team has responsibility. Promoting risk-taking, innovation, and getting the team in flow, and you can see that with the Kilkenny teams and Tipperary teams, Galway teams, Mayo teams. When the team is in flow, what? No, they didn't. I know that, and we're not doing too good in the league now. But I have faith in Brian. But we recognise when we see a good team in flow and what it looks like on a hurling pitch or on a football pitch, and people playing to one another's skills and strengths. And this is what he said too, is the shared decision making on and off the pitch. So he said really it wasn't about being visible or about yourself as the leader. It was about sharing the decision making with the team players and listening. And I suppose he said a supportive and visionary corporate management helps. So I suppose the support of your club behind you and the belief in that. And I suppose that resonates with what we're saying in relation to ourselves. So a statement there, I suppose, that sums it up really. When people are convinced, we can achieve. And I can't merit my husband with that quote, because actually Sir Alex Ferguson said it there in a recent documentary on the television I thought was interesting as well. So none of us would argue really that leaders can help create a deeply satisfying organisational culture at the unit level by engaging staff in the development of shared values. We've talked about that ad nauseum today. So it requires that paradigm shift from a more traditional command style and control of staff supervision, and again to that more transformational style of leadership in which leaders enhance the motivation, morale and performance of their follower groups. My references are on the bottom of my slides, which you can share after. So we're looking for a model of distributed leadership. And I suppose in my little picture there should probably be little goldfish swimming around, disrupting that leadership as well. So as organisations grow in size and complexity, it becomes even more critical to distribute the leadership load. Conventional structures that rely upon concentrated leadership to drive decisions towards the centre run the risk of being constrained by their own organisation. They also lose the opportunity to empower a much broader base of competent leaders. The capacity of the organisation increases when it distributes the load to competent leaders on the ground who can make the best knowledge-based decisions. A recent friend of mine was over doing a masterclass for the CNM2s following their programme on grounding compassion in your leadership. And she mentioned a colleague of hers, Stu Friedman, who has a website dedicated to total leadership. And he's written a lot of books there which are available to surface yourself if you want to have a look at them. And his purpose really of total leadership was talking about the whole 4 domains of your life, the work, home, community and self, by creating a mutual value among them. And I think Juanita referred to it earlier really, that we're bringing home some of our stuff home. And what he talks about in his book is about using the strengths and the values that we have, within the home, that they don't have to be different. He's talking about being real there, acting with authenticity by clarifying what's important. Being whole, acting with integrity by respecting the whole person, and being innovative, acting with creativity by continually experimenting. So those 3 key things he sees as quality of leaders: being real, being whole, and being innovative. They really struck a chord with me, and it resonated with what we're trying to do with the Leaders for Compassionate Care programme in trying to, envisage those strengths within our leaders. And New York Times as well, they talk about Stuart as a management professor at the Wharton School in the University of Pennsylvania with a mixture of earnest admiration, gratitude and a rock star adoration, so I think maybe his books are worth a read. His skills for being real when he's aligning actions with what's important by focusing on what matters most, and genuinely conveying a true leadership story. So I suppose knowing where you've come from, where you're at and what your future is going to hold, and that talking about having passionately articulating a clear leadership vision. And pursuing accountability for meeting valued goals with metrics. So having some kind of measurement, and Philip talked to them earlier I suppose having the data but knowing how to interrogate the data, that it actually makes sense. Skills for being whole, building networks of trust by caring about and contributing to others, communicating to clarify and negotiate expectations, and ethically influencing others to generate support in all domains, transferring assets and skills across the domains. So I suppose it's being able to go home, being involved in your community council, using your strengths that are there, using your values of your home, trust, respect, dignity, and bringing them with you into your workplace, so that there are a lot of people, I think, working in that 49% or so that are disconnected. It's because they're not really feeling that they're operating to their values all the time. And it's about not meeting the people's need to have a commode. And like that just doesn't resonate with us as nurses. So it's about trying to connect with what our values are and how we actually operate them in the workplace, and managing boundaries and smooth transitions between these domains. The skills for being innovative are questioning assumptions about current methods requiring trade-offs, encouraging flexibility in means while focusing on results, and then courageously embracing change. Fostering a learning environment through smart trial and error, and seeking cross-domain synergies in resolving conflict. I'll talk to you a little bit in a minute about what the programme actually delivers, and some of these slides might make a little bit more sense. 9 key elements that support the development of healthful practice and work environments: a collaborative practice culture, a communication-rich culture, a culture of accountability, presence of adequate numbers of qualified nurses, presence of expert, competent, credible and visible leadership, shared decision-making at all levels, the encouragement of professional practice and continued growth and development, recognition of the value of nursing contribution, and recognition by nurses for their meaningful contributions to practice. And that's from the Nursing Organisation Alliance in the US. One of the 4 things for nurses as we go forward then in leading change And a recommendation around 4 themes or challenges that we have, which I think resonate with what the speakers have been talking about throughout the afternoon. The need for improving and increasing our nursing education, supporting our nurses in practicing to the fullest extent of their education and training, creating a culture and systems in which nurses act as full partners with other healthcare professionals, and collecting better nursing workforce data. The Leading for Compassionate Care programme. I suppose I want to talk a little bit through what we do in the programme, because I think it helps in supporting nurses and leaders at the front line. We're actually looking at how people re-engage with their professional values and how they appreciate the range of expertise in themselves and in the room, because people need to be acknowledged for what they're actually doing out there. I looked for a slide, I suppose, that would indicate the complexity, and it's not as complex as Mark's slide, but it just shows really here kind of a leadership, partnership, learning domain, just about the science and art of nursing, and about their role in evolving themselves as leaders. There's a huge amount of stuff in there that are clinical nurse managers, the competencies that they have already, and how they're so busy sometimes that they don't recognise all the skills and attributes that they're using all the time. I won't go through them all, but it's everything from financial management, personal and professional accountability, human resource management, relationship management, shared decision making. There's huge competencies and skills there. And it's about tapping them into and acknowledging that in themselves and in one another, and tapping into what actually makes them do what they do, as Juanita was saying earlier, what makes us come to work. Another thing is there about having a presence and a personal impact, because, you know, through moratorium, through a very complex and challenging work environment, you know, sometimes our clinical nurse managers, you know, have lost that sense of themselves being in control of their unit. And it's about finding that voice again, and it's about assuming that authority. They are in charge. And as we all hark back to the ward sisters of, you know, for organising, we feared them when I was training anyway, but there was some merit in them. You knew who was in charge on your ward, and they were, you know, determining the culture on the ward. So it's about clinical nurse managers being empowered to take that back and maximising the impact that they can have then, and how the unit is worked, how the patients are cared for, and how the multidisciplinary team engages with each other. The moment when you say yes to lots of people and clinical nurse managers. So it's that complete feeling of being overwhelmed. And listening to some of the stories of what our clinical nurse managers are telling us when they're telling us about their leadership stories in the past and the present would make the hair stand up on the back of your head, really. The stress that some of them are going home with on a day-to-day basis is unbelievable. So what do you do about it? And I found this stress reduction kit there. So, and I'm sure a lot of our colleagues, allied healthcare professionals and our medical colleagues would all maybe do this from time to time. So placing your kit on the firm surface, just follow the directions in that circle and repeat step 2 as necessary until unconscious. And if unconscious, then cease the stress reduction activity. So sometimes maybe it's just about saying no. And I suppose that's a little bit controversial with the, you know, IR about HITUS. But sometimes people need to say no, and enough is enough. Every yes we say to something, we are saying no to something else. And that often means just some precious self-care time, which we as busy nurses are often trading for the thing we have said yes to. But it's not always about no, and it's some things that's maybe doing a quality improvement to make something work better and more effectively on the ward to reduce stress. And that's another thing that's taught on the programme. So fundamental tools and techniques for improving patient care, and they're synergistic with what they're saying in the quality improvement division, and on all our courses is the IHI model of quality improvement at the moment. Until something better comes along, but it seems to be fairly good at the moment. So that's it there, and you're all familiar with it. I don't need to go through it there. Aims, measures, changes, and those rapid tests of changes. And the clinical nurse managers are well placed, you know, to go through those processes. And it's about having that process there. They are, you know, continuously quality improving all the time. Sometimes they don't have a structure to do it. And I suppose this gives them the ways of measuring things, because we know in nursing data and research that we don't have enough to say what's going on in our own country. And Philip himself earlier said he's not able to stand over quality, and he also questioned the way we're looking at our metrics, so we need to take that on board and look at it. Co-consulting is a big part of the programme as well, and a lot of our participants actually stay in touch with one another afterwards as a mutual support mechanism. So it's about developing and using skills to support peer learning and problem solving. And I suppose that they're, you know, the good qualities of a good coach, really someone that actively listens. And that thing of being listened to is very powerful for the CNM2s. And you can feel them actually drinking up that attention to themselves, because they've been so busy out there and so under resourced, I suppose, in terms of their own leadership development, that they lap it up. building rapport, asking questions, demonstrating empathy, using their intuition, helping each other set SMART goals, and how to give feedback. And we find that their skills and competencies as nurses make them good coaches, and they're good coaches to one another. And I suppose it's enabling them and giving them a structure and a process to enable that to happen. We also go through psychometric assessments with them. So that's about, again, and it touches on what people said earlier and what Abby said about understanding yourself as a leader and working effectively in teams. So they do the Myers-Briggs, and it's not really just about them seeing like who they relate to, I suppose, in Grey's Anatomy, and their favourite characters and are they the same. And it's not about identifying one personality type as the leader. ENTJs, and do we all want to be an ENTJ? Well, okay, we could be Bill Gates if we were, maybe. We could be Patrick Stewart, and we might aspire to that. But like, who wants to be Lord Voldemort? And he's the same, and who wants to be Margaret Thatcher, maybe. Prime Minister May, maybe, at the moment. But really it's about looking at 4 preferences, and some of you are familiar with MBTI, so I won't go into it in great detail, other than to say it's really looking at yourself as a person and your team, where they actually get their sources of energy from, whether they're extroverted or introverted, ways that different people gather information, whether it's from sensing, taking a lot of information, using all the senses, taste, touch, feel data, or whether it's an intuition, a more feeling type. And a more kind of a sort of bigger picture looking at things, which are kind of creative. Decision making then, and whether they are more logical in their thinking or whether they go truly by the feeling. Of course, a lot of nurses are F, I'm afraid, but thinkers can feel and feelers can think, so there's no right or wrong way to be in a preference. So, and then again, looking at how they relate to the external world, whether it's judgment or perception, that's really about how you like to be, prepared for things, whether you prepare well in advance, if you pack your holidays that you do it months in advance, or whether you're a bit like me last minute, and it's, I strive on that kind of stress. We also go through managing change, so supporting and embedding change in practice, and giving them tools and ways of looking at that, and managing conflict are also tools. I won't go into them because some of you will be very familiar with them. But just to look at what some of them said about the programme. That as part of a team with support, I can make beneficial changes in my department. It has given me the confidence to think about making a change, because for years we were denied any encouragement or support to change. Through the programme, what I learned was the biggest change I have to begin with is myself, how I approach issues and people, what tools I have, and what I need to develop to help in situations. Not to expect other people to adopt my style of leadership, but to observe their personality type. I am stronger than I believed. I have the power to introduce change and manage difficult situations. Conflict is inevitable, but how you manage it is essential to success. I could be the problem. People think differently and are programmed differently, and I need to embrace this. I have become more assertive in my leadership, and as a result, my staff feel more supported by me. I haven't implemented any major change within my department, but by becoming more aware of myself and my leadership skills, I feel that I am in charge of a happier unit. Of course, there's still lots of room for improvement that I continue to work on. And I suppose that's one person talking about the Myers-Briggs and how it helps them understand dealing with conflict and complaints people have and thinking from a different perspective. And it may be built into their makeup. And I become more sympathetic to this. So this has encouraged me to make forward plans for the benefit of my organisation. I speak now with assertiveness and believe in myself, which comes back to my original frame of belief. And it's enabling and empowering those people to have that belief. Your staff, they came in believing and they have all the competencies, and to have a belief that they can make a difference in the day. And I suppose what Juanita was saying earlier, and Mark alluded to it as well, if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. And I love the analogy with the oxygen bags. I use it with my kids all the time at home. Yeah, I need to look after myself first, you're second. With their teenagers, so they don't really care. Just to say too, with all the talk about compassion, there was a very good book written by Suzanne Gordon. I know she presented down at the Southeastern, the NMPDU conference there, which I actually missed, but I've read some of her books, and she talks about the virtue script to, the continued downplaying of nursing knowledge and skill, and too much of an emphasis on virtue and ethics, and we can get caught up too much in the care, compassion of our profession. And the challenges we face then is that we've created a problem sometimes by talking only of caring and emotional and relational work, and sometimes we neglect to talk about the technical and the scientific basis of nursing expertise, and that's, I suppose, all the bubbles that I showed you earlier, all the things that we do. But still, I think it's worthy to reflect that really we are looking for a relational leadership model, collaborative, collective learning. I'll wrap up now. Relational refers to a model perspective leadership that focuses on the idea that leadership effectiveness has to do with the ability of the leader to create positive relationships within the organisation. And I think there's an awful lot of tools out there that we can use to do that, with the Schwartz rounds, work and safety rounds, with the values in action. That there's a lot of scope for people to get out there and get connected. And I think we have to get over this whole hierarchical thing, and I suppose we're poor sometimes at it in nursing and midwifery because it's how we've been trained. But how do we ethically and philosophically work out that leadership as relational and conversational is central when we are thinking of leadership as the top on the structure? And I've asked that question of some of our significant nurse leaders at a recent conference in Athlone. And I suppose it's something we need to ponder on, and how do we actually enable that distributed leadership, and how do we actually share decision making, because every leader has a responsibility to do that at whatever level. And I suppose about creating a tipping point is that too, and I think we're somewhere on the way to it, because as you can see from all the presentations this morning, there is a joined up thinking starting to happen, and the idea that we need to value our staff and the input they have. Some of the greatest ideas I ever got from staff, and the most innovation from staff when I was previously director of nursing, was from the housekeeping assistant, catering assistant, healthcare assistants, and we need to listen to them as well. And I think it's great that they're getting involved in the Schwartz rounds and in the values in action. I think we need to value all our team and our multidisciplinary colleagues as well. So I think that's just there. I had to quote somebody, whoever, with the Dalai Lama, maybe trumps them, I don't know. But he says, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. Yeah, and I suppose the last thing I just wanted to say, and it links it back into Philip Crowley's work and Juanita's too in the Quality Improvement Division, and the whole essence of person-centered nursing framework. And I was involved in the older persons services when we involved that in 18 pilot sites there. And I suppose the sad thing is it's taken so long actually to come around again into the intellectual disabilities, and maybe we could have prevented some RS attractors had we spread it earlier. So it's about, I think, what Mark was saying too, connecting up what's going on in the services, and make sure that there's not duplication, but that services that need it get it. And I think that the Leaders for Compassion programme really maps well onto this programme in terms of looking at the prerequisites for a person-centred culture to happen. You need to have professionally competent people. We need to have developed interpersonal skills, their commitment to the job, the clarity of their beliefs and values, and about knowing themselves. And that's quite old there from Brendan McCormick and McCants back in 2010. And I suppose the second thing that looks at then the care environment, and I suppose that again is looking at that whole thing of appropriate skill mix, and that shared decision-making systems and effective staff relationships, supportive organisational systems, which is I suppose one thing too, we do have the CEOs and directors of nursing come and meet with the participants in the programme. So it's about linking up those people and enabling, those kind of connections and people to listen to one another. And I'll wrap up there now. This is my last slide. And power sharing as well as that. And it's about letting go of that power, having the governance to protect it, potential for innovation and risk-taking in order to bring about quality improvements. And that focuses then on the care processes and our team and what they're doing. So it enables us to have to work with patients' beliefs and values, with engagement with the patient, with shared decision-making with the patient, and having a sympathetic presence with them and providing for their physical needs. And if we're doing all that, the patient outcomes then should follow, which is why we're all here in it in the first place, is having satisfaction with care, involvement with the care, a feeling of well-being, creating a therapeutic culture, and hopefully a happy staff. Thank you very much.